Ladies and gentlemen, a drum roll, please.
Perfect for this edition of the show.
It's about a musician who plays several different instruments, and he's pretty good. And he's getting noticed in the band. I'm Mike Sugarman.
And I'm Janice Wright Sugarman.
And this is I'm Still Rolling. So before we get to this incredible story, let us introduce ourselves. You
Yes.
are a radio anchor who has spent many years in the business, and you've anchored in the big all-news radio stations in New York and San Francisco.
Well, good. You remember my bio. That's always good in a marriage. And you have been in radio and television like forever, since you were like a teenager, I think.
17 I started.
Well, you've won a boatload of Emmys for your TV work.
True.
So we can stop bragging on ourselves now and move along.
That's why we're good at podcasting.
That's why we were telling you all that. So you'll know that we have some experience in communicating.
But the real reason that we're qualified to do a podcast on disability is that I'm a paraplegic. This followed an operation I had on my aorta back in February of 2022, which was successful. But 2 days later in the ICU, I had a spinal cord stroke, and it left me without movement in my legs and pretty much anything below my waist.
And I'm your wife of over 40 years.
43.
So now I have some additional duties, shall we say, helping you with things that you can't do on your own.
Okay, but I'm getting better.
You're getting better every day.
That's true.
And you've got a great attitude.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Because if you were a jerk, I mean, I don't know how patient I would be. I'm not all that great as a nurse.
You're my rock. Now, back to our story. Well, first, let me tell you a different story. I probably did 10,000 stories in my 50-year career.
KPX5's Mike Sugarman shows us how Cal OSHA is cracking down. Mike?
Veronica, look at that. It's 104 degrees at 6:06 here in Walnut Creek.
Stuff like that. In 2006, I heard about this program that's kind of a school of rock for adults.
For us, the adult program at its core has really attracted working professionals.
And I decided to do a story about it. I was a fledgling guitarist, but I had some buddies at the TV and radio stations I worked at who were pretty good musicians. That's one of the photographers playing. Anyway, we practiced and played at a nightclub the School of Rock set up.
He puts the BS in CBS. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mike Sugarman and the Eyewitness Blues Band.
We called ourselves the Eyewitness Blues Band.
Far in Los Gatos. Added to the haze.
We were all news people, and because we worked in the media and got some attention, we played at station functions. We opened, believe it or not, for a speech with Bill Clinton after he was president, and we played with the Doobie Brothers, stuff that was way above our station.
I'll make it rain. Gonna make it rain in here. I'm gonna make it rain.
We were pretty good, but certainly not where we played and who we played with. Anyway, that's my musical journey.
Our guest today has a very different story.
I was born without arms.
Yeah.
That's his drumming, and this
is him at the piano. Alvin Law, a musician of note, and his life has led him to a career as an inspirational speaker. Oh, and a note, you'll notice he isn't on video. We only recorded his audio because it was before we decided to go to video ourselves. Disclaimer.
For 64 years that I've been on this earth, almost 65, I get noticed. And, if they don't notice the no arms, they notice me doing something with my feet.
Stories? He's got plenty. Like as he drives up to a fast food window. Yes, he drives.
They don't see you coming. They see the car coming. You drive up to the window. That'll be $6. Here.
Hands money over in his toes.
Oh, a guy said to me once, it's funnier if you're in the car behind you. Right. Because all you see is the foot going out the window, a couple of feet grabbing the double-double, and away I go.
Feet. That's what people would notice second. And then, of course, the rest of the package. And then, of course, the curiosity, right? How many times have I heard and how many times have you heard, men? What happened to you? So, you kind of tell them. And I'm privileged to be able to share my story. And I mean that.
No.
So what happened to you?
Well, in the dark ages of our humanity, way back in the 1950s, mid-50s, a German drug company invented a pharmaceutical product for morning sickness called thalidomide.
It's 60 years since one of the biggest scandals in medical history. The drug thalidomide was supposed to help pregnant women suffering from nausea and sleeplessness. But just one tablet could cause severe malformations in unborn children.
Of course, in those days, they didn't test products like we do now in the pharmaceutical industry. So it kind of went past all of the possible dark side in favor of profit. And I'm not anti-profit. I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own company. I've been a speaker for a long time. But I am very much in favor of safety. And of course, the idea that it was unsafe didn't occur to anybody because it was really helpful for the people who were taking it, the mothers in this case.
I was planning my own funeral, but this drug gave me my life back.
Certain cancers, instead of being rapidly fatal, will become more treatable.
It is a wonder drug.
It's really the gift of life for some patients, and there really is no greater gift than that.
The science of it was very simple. The drug caused an imbalance inside the woman's body, and body parts didn't grow to their full stage. So the typical signature that we would see, kind of a picture that people might be familiar would be missing limbs. Rarely all of them, but common. So I'm also very rare in the sense that I have no arms at all, yet my legs and feet are perfectly healthy and intact.
Distillers paid £33 million in compensation to nearly 460 children.
Some were blind, deaf, or brain damaged.
So it really did vary depending on when the mother took the pills. It depended on their chemistry. But more than anything, it depended on such a percentage. So we didn't end up with millions and millions and millions. We ended up with the number acknowledged by what has been studied over and over again as around 20,000 worldwide. I'm in Canada, so it's about 125 Canadians were registered, and that was through a process of the drugs that were given to the moms. But in one of life's great twists, the United States of America never licensed thalidomide. So the number in America is somewhere around 20 that were affected by clinical trials in the early stages. But ironically, a Canadian doctor named Florence Kelsey, and the FDA had no women, so they hired one. And this is a very true story. I'm not meant to sound, a bit suggestive here, but they thought she'd be a pushover. So when they gave her the file to rubber stamp the drug so that the company could make millions and give it to millions probably of women, she wouldn't allow it because they didn't have any research. And she's a hero. She actually got the Presidential Medal of Honor and given to her by President Kennedy in 1963 before he passed away. So, yeah, big deal. And again, I know the history because I'm fascinated, but not because I'm angry, because I'm just fascinated. And I think that's the most important thing.
On that note, the women obviously didn't know.
No.
And I've often wondered, because I was very familiar with the story, how they felt. Did your mother feel, as mothers do, guilt, like somehow it was her fault?
I was taken into a foster home. So in fact, the picture that I'm going to post on my social media, my mother holding me is a foster mom, and she was 55 years old at the time. So that's very significant because I did do a lot of research on this as part of a task force in the late 1980s in Canada. It just happened. It was something that took place. There was curiosity about what happened to those babies because they were called the thalidomide babies.
Yeah.
And when we started doing research, and here's the direct answer to your question, yes, over 90% of the moms expressed tremendous guilt. And again, in a tremendous irony, one more time, they didn't do anything wrong. It was the doctors who really didn't also do anything wrong. And one could argue the drug company really didn't do anything wrong either, because they were making something that worked. But I'm a philosophical person in the sense that I was not born this way by accident. I was maybe not born this way intentionally, but as my wife now would say, that jaded old expression, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So my foster mom, who became my only mom because they eventually adopted me, as good old Dr. Phil would say, had no dog in the hunt. All they had was a job to do. And my mom's best line ever. She used it on all the foster kids that came before me and then stopped coming when I came to live there. We don't care what happened to you, but we sure do care what's going to happen. And that mindset is why I can talk to you today with the success story that I've got.
Well, she sounds like an incredible woman, and I'm sure your dad is the same way.
Could you just repeat that line about it? Didn't you believe things happen for...
this was not intentional.
Yeah.
But this was also not perhaps an accident. This was meant to be. This was the way I was meant to live my life. And I think knowing that philosophically, I never sat around thinking this when I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old. I certainly didn't think of it when I was an adolescent. But as my life progressed, it occurred to me, I mean, I'm going to be really blunt. The biggest thing I overcame was the ignorance of 1960. Right? I mean, we know a lot now. I mean, you sure have been through a journey, okay? But before you ended up in that chair, brother, did you know anything about disability?
No.
There you go. So why would anybody know? And I think that was the true gift of Hilda Law, was her name. I like to joke in my presentations, Mom had no sense of what to do. Okay, she'd never taken care of a special needs child. She couldn't exactly Google no arms, you know. Siri, what do we do? Is there like a YouTube video for that? I mean, can you imagine? Just flying by the seat of her pants, so to speak. But Mom was what I would call, not to get all deep and weird, but I would call my mom an intuitive.
She saw something that nobody else could see. And that was indeed positive potential. I had to make my bed every morning before school. I had to pick up my toys every night before bed. I had to vacuum the carpet 3 times a week because Mother expected neatness.
I met my birth mother in 1993. I met her because of my current wife. I've had 2 of those as well. I had a practice round that was only 18 months long that produced a son that's going to be 40 years old in August. Oh. And then I met my current wife in 1991, and we've been together ever since. And she was instrumental. But of course, there's a lot more to my wife than just one sentence. But a very powerful influence in my life, it caused romantically, emotionally, but more than anything, philosophically. And we talked about it, you know, when are you going to meet your birth mom? When are you going to meet your birth mom? And I'm like, I don't care. And it wasn't a I don't care negative. It was like, why would I care? I was there for 5 days and they left. They didn't have anything to do with my upbringing. They didn't have anything to do with what I overcame. And then my wife said the line, of course, that strikes me to this day. Yeah, honey, except you're doing it again. This isn't about you. And it was right. This was about meeting. Her name was Sophie. Sophie, her last name, Paholko, good Ukrainian name. Oh. They were farmers. They were poor. They lived on a farm in rural Canada, Saskatchewan, the province. No power, no running water, and 2 small children already. But I say it again, this was 1960. So nobody in the medical community said, hey, we know he's going to be fine. They just said the exact opposite. So I became a number, frankly, a number that would probably have been institutionalized. Had I not ended up in the foster home, I was too young to go live in a hospital. I didn't have that capability as a baby. But I landed in the Law's house and I never left.
What? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You are a remarkable person. We've already mentioned that for a number of reasons. But what struck me when I first saw you was you are an incredibly talented musician.
I am.
You are. And with instruments that you need arms for.
Right.
Like the drums.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, and you know what? This is the most powerful story that I believe I own. I own a lot of them, but I think this was the story that transformed my life trajectory. I wanted to be a musician because when I was a kid, practicality, right? I couldn't play sports. I mean, I use this joke. It's a million years old about how, I can play soccer. And it's actually called football, if we want to be very correct here. Anyway, I could play soccer. I never got the penalty for, touching the ball with my hands. Ha, ha, ha. It was another part of my life development that was huge, was sense of humor. But also being smart enough to know, I guess I'm probably never going to play in the National Hockey League playoffs. I'm never going to hold the Stanley Cup above my head. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to play football. I'm never going to play basketball. I'm never really going to play soccer or football. So what did I do? I wanted to play music. So what does every kid and their mom do when they want to play music? They go to try to get piano lessons. And there was so many different reactions that were real, of course, but almost predictable looking backwards. Best piano teacher in town was a compassionate human being, but she was also practical. And again, for the purposes of audio, I have what my wife would describe as beautiful feet. I do manicures or pedicures, I guess. I take care of them, but I have short toes. There's a picture. Mm-hmm. I have short toes. I mean, they're not ugly short. They're just short. So the first time I tried to play the piano, the lady said, "You're never going to do this." And, Alvin, this isn't meant to hurt your feelings, and this is so powerful. I can vividly remember it. She wasn't trying to be mean, but she said, "Your mom and dad are dreaming of you to be like everybody else. When, sweetheart, you will never be like everybody else. And at 10 years old, you take that the wrong way. At 64 years old, I embrace that." Right? I love not being like everybody else, because why would I want to be like everybody else? There's too many everybody else's. I want to be not special per se, but I want to make a mark on society that has to do with my profession, but more than anything to do with why I believe I was put on this earth.
Was there ever a sentence constructed that should be turfed from the English language, or any language for that matter? There's nothing I can do. Do you know, that is just an attitude choice. There's always something you can do.
The great story of my life, a band director that had come to Yorkton, Saskatchewan from the United States, and he had this wonderful attitude. But he reminded me of a tough coach, okay, as I got to know him. But he phones my mom one day to say that I've instituted a 5th grade policy for music aptitude tests, and your son Alvin got 96%. So I'm calling you, Mrs. Law, to wonder if you give me permission to invite your son to join the school band. And of course, mom is like, wow, first of all, that's a really good mark. But second of all, did you have an instrument in mind? And of course, the band director goes, you know what? I don't normally do this, but why don't we give him a little bit of a privilege here? With that kind of talent, why don't you just bring him to school? He can pick any instrument he wants. So then mom, of course, hits him with the obvious. You're new to town, right? So obviously you've not met Alvin. And he's like, no, why? Is that important? Mom said, yeah, kinda. He has no arms. And it's like, the band director said, you're kidding. And no, we hear that a lot. No, he was born that way. And then the band director, of course, reacts like anybody would, but especially a 20-something. I can't even imagine it, Mrs. Law, what it must be like, but clearly we can't have a band member without arms. So that was the logical answer. And as a speaker, I throw that story into the mix when I'm talking to audience to say, it's a bit of a trick question, because then I say, what would you do? And the majority would say, well, I wouldn't know what to do. Precisely. Why would anybody know what to do? But the good news was I grew up in a small town in Canada. And the new guy in town was in the staff room at the high school one day with a bunch of people that weren't new to town. And they knew me. I didn't exactly blend into the fabric in Yorkton. I was out there doing stuff with my parents. So I said, that Law kid, you should see what he can do with his feet. He can even reach up and feed himself, and he can drink with a pop with his toes or soda, and he can eat with his toes. In fact, he goes to the fast food places in town all the time. You should see him eat a big hamburger with his toes.
They don't see you coming. They see the car coming. You drive up to the window. That'll be $6. Here. Oh, a guy said to me once, it's funnier if you're in the car behind you. Right. Because all you see is the foot going out the window, a couple of feet grabbing the double, and away I go.
So it was literally a brainstorming session that led them to this bizarre, totally unpredictable idea. Let's mount a trombone on the side of a wooden chair with fashioned metal rods and clamps on the top, one on the side, one on the back, that would hold the trombone that I would play with my right foot. So then I got into band playing trombone. I got to be actually pretty good at it. In fact, so good that I got to go to an elite jazz camp in Canada.
Yeah.
And of course, that surprised a few people when I showed up. But here was the best part of the story. Nobody felt sorry for me in music. I have a line that says, musicians don't care what you look like. They just have one question: can you play? And I just, all I wanted to do was say, yes, I can. And here's the really good part of the story that's going to show my age. I'm a little bit against these devices, that we carry around, which I, by the way, can't carry around because I don't have any hands, that young people are on them, and I'm not trying to take away their fun. But when I was a kid, I didn't have distraction. So every spare minute I had, I was in our basement in Canada playing my trombone and playing not only to scores that we would get from band, but I started to play to music like vinyl records. Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Woody Herman. I started playing hard jazz. And as a consequence, I became really, really good at it. So I go to this jazz camp and they go, yeah, okay, let's watch you play. And then their minds are like blown. And one thing led to another. And I ended up at a jam session and we were fooling around. And I went over and put a pair of drumsticks between my toes and started banging on the drums. And everybody's minds were blown again, saying, where'd you learn to do that? I said, that's the first time I've ever done that. Now, apparently, that's not true. Apparently, I had played pots and pans and wooden spoons when I was a little boy, but I couldn't remember that. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I started playing the drums. So the drums are the one thing that I still play to this day. And one of the highlights of my life was a concert in Tokyo 3 years ago now, November 2022, a concert called the True Colors Festival in Tokyo, where the headliner was Katy Perry.
We flew to Tokyo.
So I'm not only a pretty good drummer, I'm what I would call, without sounding too full of myself, a world-class drummer. I know. The mindset of thinking that and believing that is just so impossible, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
But it's true. And I was one of those passionate musicians. But here was where the rubber hits the road, to use a bad cliche. I never did it for a living. I could have the ability, but the world wasn't ready for an armless drummer. I mean, we all talk about the Def Leppard drummer that lost his arm in the motorcycle accident, right? From the band Def Leppard. He gets all this attention because he lost an arm. And I'm like, sorry, he's an incredible drummer. It doesn't matter if he's using his nose, right? He's playing. That's what counts.
Did on that note, did you get pushback along the way from people who said, oh, this is like a gimmick, or you know, this guy's taking too much attention away from the rest of us, or stuff like that?
Sure. And that happened in music festivals.
Yeah.
Because the sort of the way things were back then, and I don't know what they're like in 2025 in high schools across the world, and especially North America. But where I grew up, there were music festivals. So you would go and compete. And you would do a solo competition. So you would come in, whether it was by yourself or typically with a piano player, and they would play and you would play along, and it was a solo. Thing was, the adjudicators had a real mind, and they knew this was not a novelty. And you know what they would often compare it to? And this is real. I'm not going to name drop because I'm name dropping, but I've heard this story before. That one of the templates for musicianship was Ray Charles.
Oh woman, don't treat me so mean. You're the meanest old woman that I've ever seen. I guess if you say so, I'll have to pack my things and go.
Okay, and that time frame of when I was coming into music, he was way before me, obviously. But he and Stevie Wonder and all of these names that made people understand it's about the music, not the amazing ability. I always wanted to be a performer. And I think that probably started at a very early age because I was very precocious. But more than anything, I was not embarrassed. That to me was the key. I've only, again, back to the adolescence, that's too easy. But I've never been embarrassed. But it took me a while. It took me till I met my wife in 1991, for example, to be comfortable enough to take off my shirt in a public swimming pool or on a beach. Because, it's not, by the way, it's not because I'm disfigured. It's just because I'm imperfect. And if you go to the beach, you see a lot of, especially men. And I bet you have an idea on this one too, brother. The body perfect and what that's supposed to represent. Well, I like to say when I met my wife, who was, again, the second lady in my life that changed my life, my wife since 1993, she's a stunningly beautiful woman. And I'm just going to say that. So when I met her, I couldn't keep my eyes off her. So I know why I was attracted to her. Little did I know we'd get married. What I never understood is why she'd be attracted to me. And her line, not my line, her line, well, it sure wasn't the biceps, honey.
Well, I have an exceedingly beautiful wife as well. And
I see that. Nobody else can see it.
It's also not my biceps, I'm sure.
Oh, your biceps are getting pretty good though from pushing that. So what do you do for a living?
I'm a professional speaker.
My wife and I were in an antique store one day. We're cruising around. She's on one side of the store. I'm on the other. These old guys are following me around, and they're looking at me because every time I look at them, they pretend to be looking at something else. I came around a corner. There was a pair of mannequin arms on a bookshelf. So I grab one under my chin because that's how I carry stuff, right? I shouted across the store, "Darlene, I may have found them."
So tell us about that. I mean, you've told us, you've said so much that I'm sure you use in your inspirational speeches, right?
I think there's a funny little line I use, and it's meant to be humorous, but it's very real. People always say, "When do you start speaking?" I say, "When I was 3 years old." And they go, don't be a smart butt." No, really. Was I a speaker then? No. But I would be advocating for myself. So when people would come up to my mom, strangers, because in our little town, 10,000 people is not little, but it's not Manhattan, right? Little tiny town, everybody knew me. So when a stranger came, they would obviously ask, "What happened to your little boy?" And my mom started saying, and I vividly remember it, "Ask him, he's not stupid." Because there was a connotation back then, if you had a physical challenge, you also had a mental challenge. Remember, that's how long ago this was and how little we knew. So I started having a voice of my own. And of course, that made me charming. And people would go, "Oh, look at that cute kid. Thank you very much." Because it felt so much better than "You freak." But I became a speaker because I had an opportunity that 1981 represented when the International Year of Disabled Persons was declared by the United Nations. My first career was actually radio. I was a radio broadcaster. I actually went to college for it. I graduated in 1980. I got a job in Canadian rock and roll radio, playing vinyl records and making audio documentaries on reel-to-reel audio tapes, using a razor blade between my toes to do the edits.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
I can hardly do that.
That was one of my true skills. I was really good at documentaries. And as a consequence, I could use my music knowledge, my love for music. But of course, I was a product of the 70s, right? And I'm not apologizing for that or not trying to make a big deal out of it. But that's when in my opinion, me and music just fell in love with each other. So, I was fascinated by the stories of what made the Beatles, what made the Rolling Stones, what made Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and all these bands. And I had to do that as part of my job.
So let's hear it. Let's hear it. This is Alvin Law, CWJ in Regina.
You even pronounced it right.
Yeah, I get lucky with capitals. I want to hear you. Give me a time check.
1980, my station was called FM 92, the Rock of Regina.
There you go.
And I like to joke along too that I even had the hair that went with it. The Led Zeppelin hair or the Queen hair. The big hair. I had big hair, and with no shoulders, it made me look like a Pez dispenser. Get your audience to imagine that right now.
Tell us some of the messages that you try to convey in your speeches.
Well, I'll give you an example that's very, very current. And I'm glad you asked me that, all right? Because I still speak at schools, but primarily my biggest audiences now are corporate, as we would call it. So adults. Now, events have been on a slow recovery since COVID, so we haven't had big events very long. But, I'll give you one of my favorite examples. I'm going to change stories here for just a second. One of my favorite examples of New York, since you guys are in Brooklyn. I was invited to be the opening speaker for a huge event called Intercoiffiere. It's a French word for hair. And it's an international convention for hair designers in New York, in Manhattan, at the Hilton, in front of 3,000 hairstylists from all over the world. All right? 3,000 hairstylists. I want you to think about the personality types that were in that room. Probably a little bit like the Met Gala we've been all talking about.
Yes.
All that stuff, right? Kind of like exactly that. So I come out on stage, and the first thing I say is, thank you for honoring me to be your opening keynote speaker. But let's just talk about this for a second. I have no arms. I have no hair.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to use scissors, and yet I'm your opening speaker.
Yeah.
What the hell were you folks thinking? And then my message to them, for example, would have been, the outside of a person matters. But the most important part of a person is the kind of thing that you as hair designers can provide for them, and that is a smile, a love for life, a joy for being. But more than anything, I would hope that behind that chair, you are also becoming almost like a counselor, where you can listen to people's problems, you can share some stories to help them feel better. But more than anything, you are in a position, ladies and gentlemen, to change somebody's life, whether it's shallow or not. I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying, how many people get to find a job where they can make an impression on someone that lasts sometimes for an entire career? So that would be a gist of a message. The student messages would be very, very different, because I'm dealing with teenagers who are going through their own troubles. So just this past week, I was in Edmonton, Canada, speaking at a private school where all 275 students in high school had emotional challenges. They also had all the code words, the code names and labels, the ADHDs and the OCDs and all those Ds. Them, I acknowledge they're real, but let's acknowledge something else. What does acknowledging that they're real help a person deal with when they're having emotional struggles, when they're having turmoil, when they're considering suicide? And I walk into a building and say, look how lovely life can be. And the kids just sit there in awe. And of course, when I play the drums. But more than anything, they find a confidant, somebody who understands them. But here's the big thing. They're already in a school. That's why they're there. And they're at a private school. They couldn't fit into regular high schools. So that would be another extreme of an example. But generally speaking, what my message is to everybody, take another look at us as people, take another look at the world and as people, our authentic selves. But more than anything, we're all up against something. We're all up against something, and we can all overcome those things. But here is the most important thing. We should never, ever have to do it alone.
What a wonderful and inspiring guy. And what he said about no one should have to do this alone, that's exactly why we're doing this podcast.
After this happened to me, right away I started thinking of stories I could do, because
the pain meds had barely worn off, and you were interviewing the doctors, the nurses from your hospital bed.
I was, because I figured this happened for a reason. And one of the reasons is to let people know that that there's life after a disability. And I wanted to talk to inspirational people about it. And that's why we're doing this podcast.
Being disabled doesn't define you. Your talents, your natural talents, and the talents that you work on, the talents you develop, all of those things define you. I loved it too when people would sort of look at him like, "Oh, you're just getting in the band because you're kind of a novelty act," until they heard him play, and then it was like, "Whoa, no!"
Pretty darn good.
You're darn good. So you always have to work hard. Always have to work hard at it.
Okay, done?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait, by the way, to help us spread the word about this, So other people don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
Leave a comment if you like, good or bad. We don't care. Just like to hear from you. Like us and tell a friend. Tell someone you meet over coffee. Tell a stranger on the street about our podcast, if you would, because we want to get the word out to as many people as possible.
I'm Mike Sugarman.
And I'm Janice Wright Sugarman.
And this has been I'm Still Rolling.